My in-laws' cruel mockery, a stinking beggar in a suit, struck me deeper than I could bear, and my blood ran cold as 15 guests witnessed my shame. I looked into the eyes of the man who ruthlessly destroyed others, and my heart pounded as I silently walked away. But his empire collapsed in just a month. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My front door burst open without warning. The Chicago Tribune scattered across the hardwood floor as I jumped from my reading chair, heart hammering against my ribs. Dad, I need you to hear me out completely before you react. Gus stood in my doorway, car keys jangling in his trembling hand, face flushed like he'd been running. That tone tells me I'm not going to like this. I pushed my reading glasses up my nose, studying my son's agitated expression. Late afternoon light slanted through the Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across his face. He stepped inside, closing the door with deliberate care. Lillian's planning our anniversary dinner next Friday. Something special at that new place downtown. Her parents will be there. The blood drained from my face. Stop right there. I told you 3 years ago. Never again with those people. Dad, please. No. I bent to gather the scattered newspaper sections, my hands shaking slightly. Margaret's wedding photo caught the light from the side table, her smile seeming to mock this entire conversation. I made myself clear after that disaster of a dinner. Your wife's father showed his true colors that night. Gus moved closer, his voice dropping to that pleading tone I remembered from his childhood. Things change, Dad. People change. Adolf's different now, more respectful. He asks about you. Respectful? The word tasted bitter. I straightened, clutching the crumpled Tribune to my chest. Is that what you call it when a man spends an entire evening reminding everyone present exactly what he thinks of working-class men who dare marry above their station? That was 3 years ago. He was drinking too much that night. You know how? I know exactly how your father-in-law operates. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. He waited until your mother was gone, until I was vulnerable, then showed me precisely where I stand in his world. Gus's shoulders sagged. Mom would want us together as a family. Those words hit like a physical blow. I set the newspaper on the coffee table with exaggerated precision, buying time to steady my breathing. Don't you dare use your mother's memory to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm trying to heal our family. His voice cracked slightly. Lillian's pregnant, Dad. We haven't told anyone yet, but this could be a new start for all of us. The room went silent, except for the ticking of Margaret's grandmother clock. A baby. My grandchild, carrying Kennedy blood through Lillian, but also carrying Dixon blood through Gus. Through me. You think a baby changes what that man said about your mother? About me? I turned toward the window, watching a neighbor walk their dog down the quiet Evanston street. He called her charmingly naive for marrying beneath herself, called me a charity case she picked up out of misguided kindness. He was wrong, completely wrong, and I told him so. After the fact, I faced him again. You sat there silent while he carved me up like a holiday turkey, then found your voice later when it was convenient. Gus's face reddened. That's not fair. You're twisting. I'm remembering accurately. The old anger rose in my chest, hot and familiar. Your mother spent 40 years proving that love matters more than money, more than social position, more than the Kennedy family fortune. She never once made me feel less than enough. Then her father reminds everyone that I'm still just the mechanic's son from Cicero who got lucky. Margaret's father, Dad, you mean Lillian's father, Adolf Kennedy. The correction stung because he was right. Grief still scrambled my thoughts sometimes, made me mix up relationships. Your wife's father, then. Same result. Gus stepped closer, his eyes desperate. One dinner, Dad. Just try. For the baby. For Mom's memory. For me. I stared at my son. This man I'd raised, who'd chosen comfort over loyalty, who'd married into wealth and now danced to their tune. Margaret would have been disappointed, but she also would have understood. Love makes us do foolish things. I promised your mother something before she died. The words came out quieter than intended. I promised I'd never let anyone dishonor her memory again. How is having dinner dishonoring her memory? Because sitting at that table, pretending everything's fine, means accepting what he said about her judgment, about our marriage, about me. I walked to her photo, touching the silver frame. She deserves better than that compromise. Gus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tight with frustration. So that's it? You're choosing pride over family? I'm choosing dignity, something your generation seems to have forgotten. He jangled his keys again, a nervous habit from his teenage years. Fine, have it your way. But when this baby is born, when there are Christmas mornings and birthdays and family photos, remember this moment. Remember that you chose to stay bitter instead of moving forward. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle Margaret's china cabinet. I stood alone in my living room, newspaper scattered at my feet, the house still vibrating from his exit, the silence pressed against my eardrums. I moved through the house like a ghost, touching familiar objects that still carried Margaret's presence. Her reading glasses on the kitchen counter, her favorite coffee mug in the dish drainer, the Afghan she'd been crocheting when the cancer took her, half finished and draped over her chair. Each item was an anchor to better times, before Adolph Kennedy showed me how the other half really lives. I settled at our kitchen table, the same oak table where we'd shared 40 years of morning coffee and evening conversation. The same table where she'd told me about the diagnosis, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. That Thanksgiving dinner in 2021 played in my mind like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. Margaret had been gone 8 months. Gus insisted I needed to get out, meet Lillian's family, start building relationships. They're good people, Dad, he'd said. You'll see. The Kennedy mansion in Lake Forest had intimidated me from the moment we pulled through their iron gates, marble everywhere, paintings worth more than my annual pension, staff in actual uniforms serving drinks. I'd worn my best suit, the one Margaret helped me pick out for Gus's college graduation, and still felt underdressed. Adolph Kennedy was everything I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, commanding. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. So, you're the famous Eldon Dixon we've heard so much about. Famous? The word dripped with condescension. Dinner was a performance. Crystal glasses, multiple forks, conversation about vacation homes and charity galas. I tried to contribute, mentioned my work at the engineering firm, but my stories about infrastructure projects couldn't compete with their tales of European wine tours and private jet convenience. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were having coffee in their library, actual leather-bound books that looked like they'd never been opened. Evelyn Kennedy was showing me photos of their family history, pointing out ancestors who'd built Chicago railroads and founded banks. Margaret was such a sweet girl, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy women use when discussing the less fortunate. We were all surprised when Lillian told us about Gus's background, so different from what we expected. I should have left then. Instead, I sat there like a fool while Adolph refilled his brandy snifter and joined the conversation. Nothing wrong with working-class values, he'd said, swirling the amber liquid. My grandfather started with nothing too. Of course, that was different times. These days, with education being so accessible, it's interesting when intelligent people choose simpler paths. The words hit like individual slaps. Simpler paths. As if my 40-year career designing water treatment systems was some quaint hobby. As if the bridges and tunnels I'd helped build were children's toys. But the worst was yet to come. Margaret must have seen something special in you, Adolph continued, his smile never wavering. She was always drawn to charity cases, even as a child. Remember Evelyn, how she collected stray cats? Same nurturing instinct, I suppose. Charity case? The room went silent. Even Lillian looked uncomfortable. Gus opened his mouth, then closed it, glancing between his father-in-law and me like a child watching his parents fight. I stood up slowly, my coffee cup rattling against its saucer. Thank you for dinner. I should be going. Oh, Eldon, don't be sensitive, Evelyn laughed, that tinkling sound rich women make when they've said something cruel and want to pretend it was a joke. Adolph didn't mean anything by it. We all admire how devoted Margaret was to you. Devoted. As if my wife had been some saint ministering to the poor instead of a woman who'd chosen love over social expectations. I walked out without another word. Gus followed me to the car, making excuses, promising it wasn't what it sounded like, insisting his in-laws were really good people who just expressed themselves poorly. 3 years later, and my hands still shook when I remembered that night. I pushed away from the kitchen table and walked to the window. Mrs. Peterson next door was tending her roses, the same ritual Margaret used to perform every evening. Normal people living normal lives, free from the casual cruelty of the wealthy. Margaret's voice whispered in my memory, "You're worth 10 of them, Eldon Dixon. Don't let anyone tell you different." But I had let them tell me different. I'd sat there and absorbed their poison like a sponge. Never again. Saturday morning found me staring at untouched scrambled eggs, coffee growing cold in Margaret's favorite mug. The kitchen felt different in daylight, smaller somehow, as if the weight of last night's argument had compressed the walls. I picked up the phone 3 times before finally dialing Gus's number. "Dad?" His voice was cautious, still raw from yesterday's confrontation. "I wasn't sure you'd call. I've been thinking about what you said, about the baby." I stirred my eggs absently, watching them congeal into yellow rubber. "About family." Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, "And your mother would want me there." The admission felt like swallowing broken glass. She'd want us together, regardless of personal feelings. "Dad, thank you, really. I know how hard this is. I have conditions." I set down my fork, focusing on the conversation. "Dinner only. I arrive when it starts, leave when it ends. No family photos, no pretending we're all friends. And if your father-in-law says one word, about Margaret or me, I'm gone." "He won't. I promise, Dad. Lillian's already talked to them. They understand how important this is." The eagerness in his voice made my chest tighten. When had my own son become so desperate for his father's approval? When had I become the difficult one in this equation? Where and when? Alinea, downtown, 7 o'clock Friday night. It's that molecular gastronomy place. You know, the fancy one with the weird presentations. Of course it was. Probably cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a month. "I'll be there." "Really? You're sure?" I looked around the kitchen where Margaret and I had shared so many quiet mornings, planning our days, discussing our dreams. She'd always been the bridge between me and the world, smoothing rough edges, making peace where I saw only conflict. "I'm sure." The lie came easier than expected. "Your mother always said families work through their differences." After I hung up, I sat alone with my cold breakfast and tried to ignore the voice in my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like Margaret, warning me that leopards don't change their spots. But maybe, just maybe, 3 years had taught Adolf Kennedy something about decency. Maybe grief had softened his edges. Maybe his daughter's happiness mattered more than his social superiority. Maybe I was a fool for believing any of it. I scraped the eggs into the garbage and poured fresh coffee. Friday was 5 days away. Enough time to mentally prepare, to remind myself why I was doing this. For Gus. For the grandchild I hadn't even met yet. For Margaret's memory, not as Adolf Kennedy remembered her, but as she really was. The strongest woman I'd ever known. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found my old barber's number. If I was going to face the Kennedy family again, I'd do it looking like the man Margaret married, not the broken widower I'd become. This time would be different. This time, I'd be ready. By mid-afternoon, the guilt had settled into my chest like indigestion. $400 for a single suit. Margaret would have called it foolish, but she also would have understood. Water Tower Place buzzed with the kind of energy that money creates, conversations about summer homes and private schools, women carrying shopping bags worth more than my monthly grocery budget. I stood outside Brooks Brothers, watching well-dressed couples examine merchandise I'd never dreamed of owning. The salesman was younger than Gus, with the kind of confident smile that comes from working on commission. "Looking for anything special today, sir?" "Something appropriate for dinner, somewhere, upscale." The words felt foreign in my mouth. He led me through racks of wool and silk, each price tag a small shock to my system. But when I caught my reflection in the fitting room mirror, wearing a charcoal gray suit that actually fit my aging frame, I understood why people paid these prices. "Excellent choice," the salesman said, adjusting the shoulders. "Classic, timeless, you'll wear this for years." If I lived that long, the alteration would take 2 hours, giving me time to walk the mall and adjust to spending more on clothes than I usually spent in 3 months. That's when I saw him. Adolf Kennedy stood at the Rolex counter, examining watches with the casual attention most people give grocery store produce. Even from 30 feet away, his presence commanded space, silver hair perfectly styled, cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my suit, the kind of confident posture that announces wealth without saying a word. Our eyes met across the corridor. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his face shifted into that practiced smile I remembered from our dinner 3 years ago. Eldon Dixon. What an unexpected pleasure. He approached with his hand extended, as if we were old friends meeting by chance. Mr. Kennedy. I shook his hand briefly, feeling the softness of someone who'd never worked with his hands. Adolf, please. We're family now. His grip lingered just long enough to make me uncomfortable. Shopping for something special? Just needed a new suit. I shifted my weight, aware of how shabby my everyday clothes must look in this setting. Brooks Brothers, conservative choice. I have my suits made in London, actually. There's this little shop in Savile Row that's been serving my family for 3 generations. He paused, as if remembering something. But off the rack can be quite adequate for most occasions. The words hit like individual needle pricks. Adequate. Off the rack. Each phrase designed to remind me exactly where I stood in his world. I should let you get back to your shopping. I took a step toward the exit, but he moved to block my path. Actually, I'm glad we ran into each other. Lillian mentioned you might join us Friday night. I have to admit, I was surprised, pleasantly so, of course, after our last encounter. Things change. My voice came out flatter than intended. Indeed they do. Time has a way of putting things in perspective, doesn't it? His smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I'm looking forward to catching up properly. There's so much to discuss. The way he said it made my skin crawl, as if our previous dinner had been some minor misunderstanding rather than a deliberate humiliation. I should collect my suit. I moved past him, heading toward Brooks Brothers. Of course. Oh, and Eldon? I turned back reluctantly. Friday's quite formal. I do hope your new suit will be appropriate for the venue. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of shoppers with the easy confidence of someone who owned the world. I stood there for several minutes, watching his silver head bob through the mall traffic, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Margaret's voice whispered in my memory. Don't let him see he got to you. But he had gotten to me, again. The Brooks Brothers bag sat beside me in the passenger seat like evidence of my own foolishness. $400. I could have bought groceries for 2 months with that money, paid the electric bill, fixed the leak in the basement ceiling that had been dripping since winter. Instead, I'd bought armor for a battle I wasn't sure I could win. Traffic crawled along Michigan Avenue as Saturday shoppers filled the sidewalks. I drummed my fingers against the steering wheel, replaying every word of my encounter with Adolf Kennedy, the way he'd positioned himself between me and the exit, the casual mention of his Savile Row tailor, the pointed question about whether my suit would be appropriate, everything calculated to remind me of my place. My phone buzzed from the cup holder. Gus's name appeared on the screen, but I let it ring. Whatever reassurances he wanted to offer, whatever promises about his father-in-law's changed behavior, I wasn't ready to hear them. Not after seeing Adolf in his natural habitat, surrounded by luxury and casual cruelty. Lakeshore Drive opened up before me, the afternoon sun glittering off the lake surface. Joggers and cyclists filled the lakefront trail, people living their weekend lives without the weight of family obligations and old wounds. I envied them their simple Saturday afternoons. The radio played some soft jazz station Margaret used to favor, instrumentals that filled the car with memory. She would have handled today differently, would have found some way to diffuse the tension, make peace between stubborn men and their wounded pride. But Margaret wasn't here to smooth the rough edges anymore. I thought about turning around, driving straight home, calling Gus, and explaining that I'd made a mistake, that some bridges burned too thoroughly to rebuild, that his father-in-law and I would never find common ground because we came from different worlds entirely. Instead, I kept driving north toward Evanston, toward the small house Margaret and I had shared for 40 years. The house where we'd raised our son and built our life on foundations that Adolf Kennedy would never understand. A red light caught me at Belmont, giving me time to study my reflection in the rearview mirror. When had I gotten so old? The lines around my eyes had deepened since Margaret's death, etched by grief and loneliness. My hair had gone completely gray, and there was something defeated in my posture that hadn't been there 5 years ago. No wonder Adolf Kennedy looked at me like a charity case. The light changed, and traffic moved forward in its slow weekend rhythm. By the time I reached my neighborhood, the sun was hanging low over the western suburbs, painting everything in golden light that made even my modest street look almost elegant. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Mrs. Peterson was tending her roses again, the same peaceful ritual that had anchored this neighborhood for decades. Normal people living normal lives, free from the complications of wealth and social climbing. The Brooks Brothers bag felt heavier as I carried it inside. I hung the suit in my bedroom closet next to the black one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, the navy one I saved for church and special occasions. 3 suits now, more than I'd owned at any point in my adult life, all because Adolph Kennedy had made me feel small. I poured a glass of water and stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where Margaret's flower garden was finally showing signs of spring. She'd planted it our first year in the house, back when Gus was still in elementary school, and the future stretched ahead like an open road. Friday was 5 days away. 5 days to prepare mentally for another evening in the Kennedy family orbit. Another test of my ability to swallow pride for the sake of family peace. Sunday evening found me navigating the tree-lined streets of the Gold Coast, where money whispered instead of shouted. Gus had texted me the address that morning, along with detailed parking instructions and a reminder about dress code, as if I might show up in work clothes and embarrass the family. The Kennedy house rose from its manicured lot like something from a magazine, all glass and limestone, with architectural lighting that made it glow against the darkening sky. Cars lined the circular drive, a silver Mercedes, a black BMW, something low and red that probably cost more than my house. I parked on the street and walked up the cobblestone pathway, my new suit feeling strange against my skin. The front door was massive, dark wood with iron hardware that looked imported from some European castle. I stood there for several seconds, gathering courage before pressing the doorbell. Lillian answered almost immediately, her face brightening with what seemed like genuine relief. "Eldon, I'm so glad you decided to come." She reached up to hug me, her condition not yet visible beneath an elegant black dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Thank you for having me." I stepped into a foyer that could have housed my entire living room. Crystal chandelier overhead, marble floors that reflected light like still water, a dual staircase sweeping up to the second floor with the drama of a movie set. "Everyone's in the drawing room having cocktails. Let me introduce you around." She took my arm with the easy familiarity of family, leading me through rooms that showcased wealth like a museum exhibit. The drawing room was populated with the kind of people I recognized from newspaper society pages, men in expensive suits discussing business deals, women whose jewelry caught the light with every gesture. They all looked up as we entered, faces shifting into polite curiosity. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my father-in-law, Eldon Dixon." Lillian's voice carried across the room with practiced ease. "Dad, let me introduce you to some friends." The introductions blurred together. Wilfred Mason, something in commercial real estate. Hazel Warren, Lillian's cousin from Boston. Dr. Marcus Webb, the family physician. Catherine Fletcher, Evelyn's sister, who spoke with an accent that suggested European boarding schools. Each handshake felt like an evaluation, each smile measured and temporary. Evelyn Kennedy emerged from the crowd, elegant in navy silk, her silver hair arranged in the kind of style that required professional maintenance. "Eldon, how lovely to see you again. You look quite distinguished in that suit." "Thank you. It's kind of you to include me." "Nonsense. You're family now." She gestured toward the bar set up in the corner, where a uniformed server was mixing drinks. "What can we get you? Adolph's been raving about his new single malt, 25 years old, from some Scottish island I can't pronounce." Before I could answer, Adolph's voice boomed from across the room. "Eldon, there's the man of the hour." He approached with a crystal tumbler in hand, looking every inch the gracious host. "I was just telling Marcus here about your engineering background. Fascinating work, infrastructure development." He made it sound quaint, like model train collecting or stamp albums. "It kept me busy for 40 years. I accepted the whiskey he pressed into my hand, though I rarely drank spirits. "I'll bet it did. The unsung heroes of modern civilization, you engineers. Without your bridges and water treatment plants, the rest of us couldn't function." He raised his glass in what might have been a toast or a mockery. "To the builders of our world." The room echoed the toast politely, but I caught the glances exchanged between guests, the subtle smiles that suggested inside knowledge. Whatever game Adolf was playing, the rules had already been established without my participation. Gus appeared at my elbow, looking relieved. "Dad, how was your week? You look great in the new suit." "It serves its purpose." I took a small sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. "This is quite a gathering. Wait until you see the dining room. Lillian's been planning this for weeks." He glanced around the room, lowering his voice. "Everything okay? You seem a little tense." "Just taking it all in." I watched Adolf holding court near the fireplace, gesturing expansively as he told some story that had his audience laughing. "Your father-in-law certainly knows how to entertain." "He's really trying, Dad. This dinner means a lot to him, too." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain neutral. Across the room, Adolf caught my eye and raised his glass again, that practiced smile never wavering. But something in his expression promised that the evening's entertainment was just beginning. The dining room glittered under crystal chandeliers as dessert plates were cleared away. Adolf had been drinking steadily through dinner. First the champagne toast, then white wine with the fish course, red wine with the lamb, and now the cognac that accompanied his rambling speech about success and character. You know what separates achievers from those who simply get by? His words carried across the table with the confidence that expensive liquor provides. Vision, drive, the willingness to seize opportunities instead of waiting for handouts. Several guests nodded politely, though I noticed Dr. Webb glancing at his watch. Evelyn looked slightly embarrassed, touching her husband's arm in what might have been a gentle warning. Take my own grandfather, for instance. Adolf gestured broadly with his snifter, cognac sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Came to this country with nothing but ambition and the sense to recognize opportunity when it knocked. Built his first fortune in steel, back when Chicago was rising from the ashes of the Great Fire. Fascinating family history, murmured Catherine Fletcher, though her tone suggested otherwise. The point is, Adolf's voice grew louder, more animated. He understood that success requires certain qualities. Breeding, you might say. The ability to see beyond one's current circumstances and aspire to something greater. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The shift in his tone was subtle, but unmistakable. Of course, not everyone possesses such vision. His eyes swept the table before settling on me. Some people are content to accept their station in life. Nothing wrong with that, mind you. The world needs ditch diggers and... What was it you did again, Eldon? Something with pipes? Infrastructure engineering, I replied quietly. Ah, yes, pipes and sewers. Essential work, certainly. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Though I imagine it must be challenging, transitioning from that sort of practical labor to social situations like this. The table went quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Lillian's face had gone pale, while Gus stared at his father-in-law with growing horror. "Adolf," Evelyn said softly. "Perhaps we should—" No, it's perfectly fine." He waved her concern away. "I'm simply acknowledging the remarkable adaptation that must be required. 40 years of dealing with municipal water systems, and now here you are, dining with..." He gestured around the elegant room. "Well, with people who've never had to worry about such things." My hands remained steady, but my heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. "The truly admirable thing," Adolf continued, his words beginning to slur slightly, "is how you've managed to present yourself so respectably. That suit, for instance, quite an improvement over your usual attire. Though I suppose Margaret helped with such choices, didn't she? She always had excellent taste, despite her unfortunate tendency to collect strays." The words hit like physical blows. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably. Hazel Warren's eyes widened with the horrified fascination of someone witnessing a car accident. "She saw something in people others might overlook," Adolf pressed on, completely oblivious to the appalled silence surrounding him. "A charitable nature, you might say, always trying to elevate those less fortunate than herself." Gus half rose from his chair. "Dad, I think—" "Please, Gus, let me finish." Adolf's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm paying your father-in-law a compliment. It takes real skill to transform oneself from... What was it Margaret used to call you in private? Oh yes, her diamond in the rough. Though between you and me, I always wondered if she'd done quite enough polishing." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own breathing. Then Adolf delivered the final blow. Because let's be honest, dress a stinking beggar in the finest suit money can buy, and underneath, he's still just a stinking beggar. Time stopped. The grandfather clock ceased ticking. Crystal glasses froze mid-sparkle. Even the flames in the fireplace seemed to pause in their eternal dance. 17 people stared at me, waiting for my response to the most public humiliation of my life. I set down my fork with the precision my engineering training had taught me, folded my napkin along its creases, and placed it beside my untouched dessert. Rose from my chair with movements so deliberate they seemed choreographed. The room held its collective breath. "Thank you for dinner, Evelyn," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the frozen tableau. The food was exceptional. Not a muscle in my face betrayed the storm raging inside. I turned to face Adolf directly, meeting his bloodshot eyes with a smile that could have frozen champagne. "And thank you, Adolf, for reminding me exactly who I'm dealing with." His confident sneer faltered slightly. Some primitive instinct was warning him that he'd miscalculated. I walked around the table with measured steps, my reflection multiplying in the polished surfaces surrounding us. Past the oil paintings worth more than my house, past the antique sideboard displaying china older than my neighborhood, past guests who shrank back as if my dignity were something contagious they might accidentally catch. Gus started to rise. "Dad, wait!" I paused beside his chair, placing one hand briefly on his shoulder. "Take care of your family, son. Both of them." My meaning was clear. Choose carefully where your loyalties lie. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. She reached toward me, but I was already moving, already beyond the reach of Kennedy family apologies or explanations. In the foyer, my footsteps echoed against marble floors that had witnessed God knows how many similar scenes of casual cruelty. The butler materialized from nowhere, professional discretion written across his features as he helped me with my coat. "Your car is being brought around, sir," he murmured. Even the hired help understood the protocol for dignified exits. I stood before the massive front door, brass handle warm under my palm, and looked back once at the archway leading to the dining room. Voices were rising now. Evelyn's mortified apologies, Gus's angry protests, other guests murmuring among themselves about what they'd witnessed. But not Adolf's voice. He had fallen silent, perhaps finally understanding that he'd crossed a line even his money couldn't uncross. The Chicago evening air hit my face like a blessing as I stepped outside. Street lamps created pools of yellow light along the tree-lined avenue, and somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with the sounds of normal people living normal lives. My hands shook slightly as I got into my car, but not from shame or humiliation. They shook with something else entirely, something that felt suspiciously like anticipation. Because as I'd sat there absorbing Adolf Kennedy's calculated cruelty, listening to him, savage not just me, but the memory of my beloved wife, a remarkable thing had happened. My phone, tucked in my jacket pocket during our chance encounter at the shopping mall yesterday, had apparently been recording when I'd fumbled with it nervously. And when I'd reviewed the footage earlier today, just curious about the mall's architecture, or so I'd told myself, I'd discovered something extraordinary, a crystal-clear video of Adolf Kennedy embracing a woman who definitely wasn't his wife. The game, as they say, had changed. I sat in my armchair for 2 hours after arriving home, still wearing the suit I'd bought to impress people who'd made it clear I could never measure up to their standards. The house felt different now, not empty, but expectant, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what came next. The drive from Gold Coast had passed in a blur of streetlights and bitter reflection. I'd replayed Adolf's words dozens of times, each repetition sharpening the blade of my humiliation until it cut with surgical precision. Stinking beggar. Margaret's diamond in the rough that hadn't been polished enough. But something else had crystallized during that silent journey home. A memory from yesterday's shopping trip, when my phone had slipped from my nervous fingers outside the Rolex store. I pulled out my device now and navigated to the video folder. There it was. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of accidental footage from when I'd fumbled with my phone after encountering Adolf at Water Tower Place. The camera had been running, capturing everything through the storefront window as I'd gathered my composure. Most of it was useless, shaky footage of floor tiles and shopping bags. But the final 90 seconds were pure gold. crystal clear video of Adolf Kennedy pressing a brunette woman against the jewelry store window, his hands tangled in her hair, kissing her with the passion of a man half his age. She was younger than Lillian, beautiful in that expensive way that screamed professional maintenance. And she was definitely, unquestionably, not Evelyn Kennedy. I watched it 3 times, my engineering mind automatically cataloging details. The timestamp, the clear visibility of Adolf's face, the woman's distinctive jewelry, the intimacy that could only mean one thing. My phone rang. Gus's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. Whatever apologies he wanted to offer, whatever excuses he'd crafted for his father-in-law's behavior, I wasn't ready to hear them. Not yet. Not until I'd decided exactly how to use the weapon that had literally fallen into my hands. The ringing stopped, then started again immediately. Then again. Finally, I answered. "Dad, please don't hang up." His voice was tight with stress and shame. What Adolf said tonight was unforgivable, completely unforgivable. Lillian's crying, Evelyn's furious, and half the guests left without saying goodbye. "Good," I said simply. "I want you to know that I told him exactly what I thought of his behavior, in front of everyone. I defended you, defended Mom's memory. I've never been so angry in my life." And what did he say? Silence stretched between us, then quietly. He said he was just having some fun, that you'd taken it too seriously. Fun. 37 years of marriage dismissed as entertainment for a drunk millionaire and his audience of enablers. "Dad, are you still there?" "I'm here. I know you'll probably never want to see any of them again, and I understand. But I need you to know that what happened tonight, it changed something for me. I saw him clearly for the first time. I looked at Margaret's photograph on the side table, her smile encouraging me, just as it had for 40 years. She'd always believed in justice, even when it came slowly. Sometimes people show us who they really are, I told my son. The question is what we do with that information. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and considered my options. I could delete the video, try to forget tonight's humiliation, take the high road Margaret would have wanted me to take, or I could remember that my wife had also been a woman who believed bullies should face consequences for their actions. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a number I'd saved but never called. Evelyn Kennedy's personal line, given to me months ago during one of Gus's attempts at family reconciliation. Tomorrow, I would pay Mrs. Kennedy a visit, and I would show her exactly what kind of man she'd married. Monday afternoon found me navigating the crowded corridors of Water Tower Place, the same mall where I'd accidentally captured Adolf Kennedy's secret just days before. The irony wasn't lost on me as I climbed the escalator toward the Starbucks where I'd arranged to meet his wife. Evelyn had sounded surprised when I called, then concerned when I mentioned Sunday's dinner. "I owe you an apology, Eldon. Adolf's behavior was inexcusable. I'd like to make things right somehow." That's when I knew she was still operating under the illusion that her husband was fundamentally decent, just prone to occasional lapses in judgment when he drank too much. She had no idea what kind of man shared her bed. I found a corner table away from the main foot traffic and waited, my phone charged and ready. The video file was queued up, sound muted for discretion. My hands remained steady, but my heart pounded with the weight of what I was about to destroy. She arrived precisely on time, elegant in a navy coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her jewelry understated but expensive. She looked every inch the society matron, gracious and dignified. "Eldon, thank you for meeting me." She settled into the chair across from me, her expression genuinely contrite. "I've been sick about Sunday night. What Adolf said was unforgivable." "It was honest," I replied. "Perhaps more honest than he intended." Her eyebrows drew together slightly. "I don't understand." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Evelyn, I need to show you something. It's going to be painful, but you have a right to know." "Know what?" Her voice carried the first note of uncertainty I'd ever heard from her. I turned my phone screen toward her, finger hovering over the play button. "Your husband wasn't shopping alone on Saturday afternoon?" The video began silently, showing the exterior of the Rolex boutique through shaky camera work. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened except my nervous fidgeting with the phone. Then the frame stabilized, and there he was. Adolf Kennedy, silver hair unmistakable, pressing a brunette woman against the store window. She was younger than Lillian, beautiful in that manufactured way that screamed professional maintenance. His hands tangled in her hair as he kissed her with desperate hunger. Evelyn's face went white. Her manicured fingers gripped the edge of the table. "Who?" she whispered. "Who is she?" "I don't know, but it's obviously not the first time." She watched the remaining footage without speaking, her expression cycling through disbelief, recognition, and finally, a cold anger I'd never seen from her before. When it ended, she sat back in her chair like someone who'd been physically struck. "How long have you had this?" "Since Saturday. I was nervous after running into him. Started recording without thinking. Didn't realize what I'd captured until Sunday night." "After he humiliated you." Her voice was barely audible. "Yes." She stared at the blank phone screen for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes held a hardness that transformed her entire appearance. "Send this to me, please." I forwarded the file immediately. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy." "Don't apologize." She stood, gathering her coat with movements that had lost all their earlier grace. "You've shown me the truth. That's more than anyone else has done in 30 years of marriage." She walked away without another word, leaving me alone with my coffee and the knowledge that I'd just set something irreversible in motion. Justice, Margaret would have called it. The truth finally coming to light. The next 3 weeks unfolded with the methodical precision of a controlled demolition. I watched from a distance as the Kennedy empire crumbled, one carefully placed charge of revelation after another. Evelyn wasted no time. By Tuesday morning, she'd retained Morrison, Walsh and Associates, the most aggressive divorce firm in Chicago. By Thursday, private investigators were documenting a paper trail of Adolph's affairs that stretched back nearly a decade. By the following Monday, asset freeze orders had locked him out of every account, every credit line, every source of the wealth he'd assumed was his to command. The beauty of it was surgical. Evelyn's family money had funded everything: the mansion, the cars, the business investments, even the country club memberships. Adolph's name might have been on the documents, but Illinois law recognized the source of marital assets, and prenups, as his lawyers discovered too late, work both ways. I learned about the developments through Gus, who called me regularly with updates delivered in a tone of shocked disbelief. "Dad, you won't believe what's happening. Adolph's been cut off from everything. His credit cards were declined at lunch yesterday, in front of clients. The story's all over social media." "What about Lillian?" "She's staying with us, says she can't watch her parents destroy each other. The baby's due in September, and she doesn't want this stress affecting the pregnancy." Through the second week, the business community began distancing itself from the Kennedy name. Board positions evaporated. Partnership agreements were quietly dissolved. The Chicago Tribune ran a small item about financial restructuring in the Kennedy holdings, but everyone who mattered understood the code. By the third week, Adolph had moved from the Gold Coast mansion to a downtown hotel. Expensive at first, old habits die hard. But when those bills started adding up against frozen assets, he found himself in increasingly modest accommodations. The social ostracism was perhaps the cruelest cut. Chicago's elite operated on carefully maintained hierarchies, and word travels fast in small, wealthy circles. Event invitations stopped arriving. Restaurant reservations were mysteriously unavailable. Former friends developed sudden amnesia when they encountered him in public. I saw him once during those weeks, standing outside a bank on LaSalle Street, arguing with someone on his phone. Gone was the confident swagger, the casual arrogance that had defined him for so long. His suit was wrinkled, his silver hair uncombed. He looked exactly like what he'd become, a man whose power had been revealed as borrowed, temporary, and now completely gone. "Dad?" Gus's voice pulled me back to the present. We were sitting in his living room, smaller now, more modest since the Kennedy money had dried up. "Did you ever think something like this would happen?" I considered the question carefully. "Your mother always said that truth has a way of coming to light eventually. Evelyn filed for divorce yesterday. She's keeping the house, the investments, pretty much everything. Adolph's lawyer says he might get enough alimony to rent a small apartment somewhere." Small apartment. The man who'd called me a stinking beggar was about to discover what actual poverty looked like. "And how do you feel about all this?" Gus was quiet for a long moment. "Relieved, mostly. I know that sounds terrible, but I hated what he said to you. I hated that I didn't do more to stop it. Maybe this is what justice looks like. Justice. Margaret would have approved. Friday evening, May 30th. Exactly 4 weeks since the dinner that changed everything. I sat in Gus's living room, watching my son play with building blocks on the floor while Lillian rested upstairs. The house felt different now, warmer somehow, more authentically lived in, without the Kennedy money's cold influence. Final papers were served this morning, Gus said, settling into the chair across from me. Adolph's officially broke. Well, not broke exactly, but close enough. Evelyn's being generous with the alimony. She could have left him with nothing. I nodded thoughtfully. She's a good woman. This can't have been easy for her. She's stronger than anyone gave her credit for, including herself, I think. He picked up a toy truck, absently rolling it between his hands. She told Lillian that she should have done this years ago. Apparently, the affairs weren't exactly secret. She just chose not to see them. Sometimes we protect ourselves by not looking too closely at uncomfortable truths. The ironic thing is, he's living in the same neighborhood where you and Mom raised me. 3-bedroom apartment on Ashland Avenue, public transportation, grocery store down the block, neighbors who work for the city. I couldn't help smiling at that. He'll learn to appreciate the simple pleasures. You know what the strangest part is? He actually seems smaller now, not just financially, but physically. Like he was inflated by all that money and power, and now he's deflated to his actual size. Margaret's photograph smiled at me from the mantel, surrounded by family pictures that told the real story of our lives. Not the manufactured elegance of Kennedy wealth, but the earned contentment of people who'd built something genuine together. Dad, can I ask you something? Gus's voice was careful, tentative. Of course. That night at dinner, when he said those things about you and Mom, how did you stay so calm? I wanted to punch him. Hell, I wanted to throw him through the window. I considered my answer carefully. Your mother taught me that dignity isn't something other people can take from you. They can only take it if you give it to them. But weren't you angry? Didn't you want to, I don't know, get back at him somehow? Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. I stood to leave, kissing Lillian on the forehead as she came downstairs. The truth has a way of settling accounts without our help. As I drove home through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. Margaret's promise had been fulfilled. The man who'd dishonored her memory, who'd called her husband a stinking beggar, who'd built his arrogance on foundations of borrowed wealth and casual cruelty, had discovered exactly what his words were worth in the real world. Nothing at all. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for your courage in showing me the truth. E. I deleted the message and drove on. Some stories are better left without epilogues, some truths better left unspoken. Justice, after all, speaks for itself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. For